can already feel the violent clicking of the unsubscribe button already. Please stay. For those of you who don't know, I actually started this series in 2017, right at the end where I talked about Father John Misty's Pure Comedy, and I discussed a few other albums in this series as well, but I never really continued it. It kind of went in the background and just never really got expanded upon, but I thought it'd be pretty fun to bring it back since I have a bigger following now and I can piss off more people than I ever could before. It is essentially me just asking the viewer to explain what it is that people love about this album, and in this case, for this episode, the return of Explain the Hype, it is Amnesiac by Radiohead. Now, it's not that I don't understand Radiohead or I dislike Radiohead, because I love OK Computer and I actually really love In Rainbows. They are both great albums. I don't quite love Kid A, but I certainly see why it is beloved. I wouldn't exactly do a video on Kid A, that would be pretty stupid, because as much as I do find some tracks pretty dull on that album, I certainly do find some tracks amazing on that album. But Amnesiac, on the other hand, I just don't really find much of the synth usage on this album to be particularly very interesting. Like, you could use this and make a very textured and detailed sound, but it honestly feels very hollow throughout this album. Like, I find very little going on. I really don't enjoy the usage of synths on this album. Like, I find it to be really like hollow. Like, the sound palette of this album is incredibly stiff, and I feel as though Radiohead have the ability to take this sound further and like build upon layers and layers and layers of different sounds and textures, but there's just none of that there. Then you pair this with Tom York's whispery, very airy vocals that really don't go anywhere most of the time. Like, I struggle to stay focused because of his voice. Like, I've had a bit of an issue with his vocals in the past on previous Radiohead albums, but on this one, it is even worse. If the album's sound wasn't so bloody nocturnal, I think I'd have an appreciation for his voice here, but when he's just basically just riffing on the same vocalizations throughout, it gets so boring and tedious for me. All the time he's just doing this. He can often have very poignant lyrics, but that singing style really takes away from any impact that there could be if he was just actually, you know, singing. First track for me is one of the worst cases of this though, because it's just this really bland instrumental, nothing's really going on, it kind of moves at a really sluggish pace, and he comes through with that refrain every so often with the get off my case, get off my case, get off my case, get off my case. You and Whose Army is a similar example as well, for the first section of the song anyway, where I think there's this vocal effect that's being placed onto his voice, and it doesn't really add anything. It's just kind of like they discovered it for the first time and thought, let's try this. Obviously they didn't, but it just sounds like that to me. They haven't really fully utilized like the potential that it has to do this kind of thing, and they've just kind of thought, well, let's just try it for the first time and see where it goes. And of course, with his voice doing what it does, it goes nowhere. It does build in the second half of the song though, for sure. I mean, it definitely has more going on in the instrumentation, but again, with his vocals just pairing with this, it kind of sounds very mismatched to my ears. Much of the time on this album, to be honest, for me, sounds like there's two different songs going on at once. Like, Tom is singing for a completely different instrumental than what's being played. It's very odd, but I just don't feel like the vocals that he's going for match the instrumentals at all. Like, this is probably an opinion that no one will agree with, but for me, I feel like it needs a different type of vocalist over these instrumentals. Like, I just can't grasp the dichotomy of this. Like, it really doesn't work for my ears at all. Which again, I don't want to feel like I'm comparing to other albums, but like, it just doesn't really feel that way on In Rainbows. Kid A does not feel that way at all. Like, I feel like this album here particularly just didn't quite work. Take I Might Be Wrong, for example, which actually could describe this entire video depending on what perspective you're coming in at this Radiohead album at. But, like, the instrumental is just so boring. Like, it's such a stiff rock tune. Like, it's the same guitar riff that plays the whole way through. And I don't get how Tom thinks that what he's doing with his voice works for this style. Someone's gonna have to explain this to me. Essentially, throughout the song, he's just going over this bow bow down 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 instrumental. Like, it's experimental, definitely give it that. It's definitely unique, but man, maybe I just don't understand it. Maybe at the start of the video I said I do understand Radiohead, but at this point it might be in fact me not understanding them. I don't know. Also, I'm not completely shitting on this album throughout the whole video. I do want to say I actually really like what he's doing with his vocals on Morning Bell. I think this is actually one of their most beloved songs, as well as Pyramid Song, especially from this album. But I really love his "Release Me" refrain on the song. I actually think it sounds beautiful, more so than what he's doing on Pyramid Song. Actually, if I'm being honest, I just find it pretty ordinary for like a piano ballad, that song. You just can't get a handle of what he's saying for the most part unless you really dig into the lyrics. But I feel as though on this song, I just think that repeated refrain of "Release Me" actually has quite a lot of weight to it. Pyramid Song to my ears is just weightless, and I could use that word to describe the whole album actually. But yeah, that song just doesn't hit me in a way a beautiful piano ballad is supposed to. Hunting Bears is a very so-so instrumental interlude type song that just has nothing interesting going on to me, but then it does go into Like Spinning Plates, which I actually really like this instrumental as well. Like, I do like parts of this album. I do want to express this because I think the instrumentation here is just very busy. It's very fast paced and moving. It's like you're running through an airport trying to get to your flight. It just has that really like panicky busyness to it. Once it starts building into that ending with Tom's vocals, again, like this is a point on the album where I feel like his vocals and the instrumentation just work well together as opposed to being very separate. And I do actually really like Knives Out as well. In terms of Radiohead songs though, it's probably pretty typical for their style. It's just a pretty standard instrumental, but you know, it's not passive. It's not passive. It's not just like floating by with no impact whatsoever. There's something to it. There's a confidence to Tom's voice. It's not airy, it's not whispery. There's something that feels like it's got a pulse, you know? In terms of positives though, that is really about as far as it goes. Like, I can't really praise much else about this album. This just doesn't do it for me at all. Pull Revolving Doors is another track that's just whatever to me as well. Just these little snippets of sounds and weird oddities kind of coming together. I feel like I could get a better track by just listening to like a Mum album. You'd definitely find more appeal out of this kind of style on the album Finally We Are No One. Yesterday was dramatic, today was okay. That album, it's like these styles that Radiohead are doing on this album have been done better elsewhere, I must say. That's not to say that they're not influential though, they are very influential for what they did, but this particular album is just nah. If you disagree, which I guarantee you absolutely will disagree with everything I've just said, then please let me know what you think of this album and try and convince me about what it is that I'm missing out on. Explain the hype. Thank you for watching. Hope you enjoyed this. Hope you didn't unsubscribe. And have a good day. Thank you. Goodbye.